Welcome back to the channel. I pray that all of us will always be at peace and that the upheavals in life will only make us stronger. Let's continue together into the dramatic stories full of emotions and surprises ahead. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and press the notification bell right now so you won't miss any of the exciting episodes coming up. Your support is the strength for me to bring even better stories. Thank you all so much. Dawn broke over the low hills like a hand easing open a curtain, and the gravel road to the farm shimmered with heat left over from yesterday. When the pickup rolled through the gate, the woman in the passenger seat, Tuna, held her baby so close the boy's hair stuck to her cheek. She had not really breathed for 2 days, not since the moment Henry vanished from the porch in the soft hour when chickens scratch and kettles come to a simmer. Now, as Alex parked by the house and cut the engine, the farm felt real again. The iron latch clacking, the smell of damp hay, the chatty cluck of hens annoyed at a late breakfast. "Home," Alex said, trying for calm that didn't quite reach his voice. He hopped out, jogged around, and opened the door for her. She slid down with Henry nestled in her arms, and the tension in her shoulders eased by a sliver when her feet touched the familiar dirt. He opened the front door, flipped on the fan that ticked like a clock, and stood aside. "Go in," he said. "I'll get the lights." Inside, the house was exactly as they had left it. A pot on the stove, a towel on the back of a chair, the small mess of a life suddenly interrupted. Henry stirred against his mother. He was hungry, that tight, short cry she knew too well. Tuna pressed her lips to his forehead. "Mede? Connat," she whispered, and carried him to the small room where she kept his basket near the window. She settled onto the chair with the worn cushion and fed the baby, while Alex moved through the rooms, raising blinds, checking corners, trying to chase away the last of the strangeness. "Thank God the police found him," she said when the boy's breathing slowed again. "If they hadn't?" She left the rest hanging. Some words were better not said in a house that had only just remembered how to feel safe. Alex leaned in the doorway, his weight on one shoulder. "They were good," he said. "Quick. Lucky too." He didn't add the part about driving the county roads in widening circles, or the way a man's thoughts darken as daylight fades. He just watched Henry's hand go slack against his mother's shirt, watched Tuna's face soften into a piece so fragile he was afraid to speak above a whisper. "She'll be dealt with," he said after a moment. "Your former mother-in-law. The officers said they'll handle it in the morning." Tuna nodded without looking up. "I'm afraid she'll come back," she murmured. "She said she missed her grandson. That's why she took him. But what if she decides she misses him again?" The memory pressed in. The older woman's hard breath, the quick step up the porch, the practiced scoop of arms. She still felt the cold that emptiness left behind. "I don't think she'll try that again," Alex said, and he believed it because he needed to. Not after all this. Not after the police. She didn't hurt him. He searched for a decent word and couldn't find one. She shouldn't have taken him. That's all there is to it. The baby sighed and drifted fully into sleep. When Tuna finally lifted her face, she found Alex looking at her with a tenderness that reached all the way through his steady posture. "Thank you," she said, the 2 words heavy with the hours between the first call and the last one, the gas station coffee, the signatures at the station, the trembling that wouldn't stop until Henry was back in her arms. "If you hadn't been there, I don't know what It's nothing," he cut in, and meant it to be light, but his voice snagged anyway. "From now on, if anything happens, you call me. I'll be here." He asked to hold the boy for a minute, and she let him. He cradled Henry with the clumsy gentleness of a big man, afraid of a small miracle, and the baby made the faint, content sound newborns make when the world is warm and smells like the people who love them. "You're okay, buddy," Alex murmured. "You gave everybody a scare, huh?" They moved through the next few minutes like a dance they both knew. Alex checked the windows, flipped the switch on the oscillating fan to blow toward the crib, and pointed out that Henry had practically outgrown half his clothes. Tuna smiled for real then, the kind of smile that lives in the eyes, and said there was still a stash of bigger onesies in the bottom drawer. He nodded, conceded the point, and put the thought aside to revisit later. Henry needed to eat again soon. Alex told her he would step out and give her a minute, catch a call, clear his head. She nodded absently and lifted the baby back to her shoulder, humming under her breath as she paced to the window and back. "Eat and sleep, little man," she told him. "Eat, sleep, and grow." Outside, in the glare of late morning, Alex leaned against the truck and stared toward the road, thinking about the mill. Work had stacked up while he'd been here. Tree shipments in and out, a paper plant waiting on fiber, a machine that had been stuttering last week and couldn't be allowed to fail now. He thought of Miss Chung and Huang, two people he trusted when the days ran long, and of the margins that thinned when one person tried to be two places at once. He called in. The conversations were brisk, familiar. Miss Chung reported the bamboo trucks had finally rolled up and men were loading bundles for the paper plant. The stand she surveyed last month turned out to be even better than she hoped. The culms were old and dense, the color just right. Alex told her to proceed and thanked her for moving fast. He asked after the other shop, the old peel and veneer place that had been quiet lately, and learned she had already arranged a short-term rental. He smiled at that, relief filling a pocket of his chest he hadn't realized was tight. He made a second call to Hong, who said the barker was reassembled, knives sharpened, the first 2 trucks already processed. A third was waiting. "Good," Alex said, glancing toward the house where the fan ticked on the other side of the wall. "Keep it moving. I'll swing by later." He hung up and thought about fruit. It sounded ridiculous, coming on the heels of a missing child, but operations are like dominoes, and his brain had been laying them out for months. Miss Lan had sent a harvest report for the Phuc grapefruit. Orders from John and Adam were both large enough to test the limits of the orchard and the crew that picked it. He did the math he'd been doing for 3 nights straight. Split the shipments, hold back a little for quality control, keep the door open to both buyers, and then let the matter go, because the only calculation that mattered right now was whether Henry's chest rose and fell in easy rhythm. When he stepped back inside, the house was quiet except for the fan and the whir of a fly at the screen. Henry slept in the basket, one fist open by his ear. Tuna stood at the sink, staring out at the yard like it was a place she used to know. "He's okay," Alex said, and she nodded, the nod of a person who has already checked 100 times and will check 100 more. "You should go home and rest," she told him after a while. "You were up all night too. Your mother will worry." He considered arguing, habit, instinct, but she was right. And anyway, he wasn't going far. "I'll come back this evening," he said. "Text me if you need anything." "Anything, Tuna." She followed him to the porch. It was noon now, the kind of noon that bakes the dust into a crust and silvers the leaves on the trees. He turned at the top step. "Lock the door," he said, "even when you're inside." She promised she would, and he believed her. When his taillights disappeared, the farm swallowed the last of the truck noise and settled into itself. Tuna stood for a moment and let the light burn through, then tucked herself back into the day. There were animals to feed. She'd rushed out yesterday morning and left the buckets sitting where she set them down. She moved through the routine like a prayer. Grain for the chickens, scraps for the pigs, a scoop of pellets for the fish in the cement-lined pond. The heat leaned on her shoulders and dampened her hairline. She wiped her forehead with the crook of her elbow and glanced toward the house every few minutes, afraid to stay away too long, afraid of the silence that might be broken by a cry she didn't hear soon enough. Henry slept. Every time she looked in, he was still there, the way a child should be, left, then found exactly where you left him. While the kettle began to fuss on the stove, water for a baby bath later, Tuna told herself the things she needed to believe. She told herself this wouldn't happen again. She told herself she would not leave Henry alone even for a minute. She told herself she was not as alone as she had felt when the porch was empty and the road was an accusation. Around mid-afternoon, Alex returned to his mother's house. He tried to wipe the fatigue off his face with a cold shower, but she saw through it anyway. She was sitting on the couch with a blanket over her knees, even though the day was hot, the way mothers do when they need the comfort of something smooth beneath their hands. "You said you were eating at the farm," she scolded gently. "You didn't say a baby was missing." Alex explained, careful and brief, because some stories don't bear retelling, and because his mother's worry looks too much like his own. "They found him this morning. he said. "He's back with his mom. Everyone's okay." His mother shook her head. "That poor girl." She clucked her tongue, then brightened with an idea that warmed him despite himself. "Bring them here sometime," she said. "I'll make something. Babies like windows full of light." He told her he would, and when he went upstairs to dress for the mill, he caught his face in the mirror and thought how odd it was to see relief and wariness sitting side by side. At the yard, the afternoon ran like a well-oiled chain. Miss Chung walked him past the stacks. The new bamboo, tight-grained and straight, enough to make the paper plant's production manager breathe easier for a month. The rough timber waiting for the blades. She reported numbers and times. He nodded, offered small adjustments, and kept everyone moving toward the trucks idling by the gate. She also told him the old shop was rented. He filed the extra income under grace notes and thought again of the farm, of how grace notes were the only kind of music they could afford for a while. He met with Huang by the long machine that made the building hum, checked the knives, signed a form he didn't want to think about, and left with the feeling that if he kept his hands on enough levers, the world would be too busy to fall apart. By the time he turned back toward the farm, evening had softened the fields. He stopped at his house first, rummaged in the storage room, and found the crib his sister had left years ago. He tested the slats, carried it out awkwardly, and strapped it into the truck bed with a care that would have amused him yesterday, but felt like reverence now. As he drove, he thought about what to make for dinner and settled on chicken, because he knew where to find one and knew how to cook it without looking up a recipe. When he arrived, Tuna was at the stove with a pot and a garden smell on her hands. She came to the door in bare feet and a tired smile and blinked at the crib like it was a trick. "For him," Alex said. "He's close to rolling, right? Beds are tricky at that stage." Her face folded into gratitude so simple it made his throat tight. "It's beautiful," she said. "I'll help you put it together." She held the screws while he turned the hex key and asked where to place it, laughing softly when the crib squeaked like an old violin on the last bolt. Henry woke to the sounds and the bright shape in the corner. He blinked, curious and solemn in the way of babies who are learning that the world expands without warning. They eased him into the crib and he stretched, a starfish against the pale sheet, then yawned and, astonishingly, closed his eyes again as if the new place belonged to him at once. "You see?" Alex said, half to Henry, half to himself. "Good spot." Tuna turned the fan. "Stay for dinner," she told him. "I can boil greens. There's rice." "Let me handle the protein," he said and grinned. "I'll catch a chicken." She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Outside, he moved with a farm boy's competence, remembering how to corner a bird, how to keep his hands firm and his movements gentle. He worked fast at the sink, set water to boil, salted without measuring. She washed vegetables in a bowl by the window, looking up now and then to watch him with a quick, private smile. They fell into a rhythm no one taught them. A few words, a shared glance, the quiet clatter of plates. The room filled with a savory steam. When she slipped away to shower, he stirred the pot and tasted with the tip of a spoon, adding a pinch more salt, because he wanted the broth to be right. He thought of how food had been fuel for so long, and how this pot made it feel like an offering. By the time she returned, the chicken was resting, the rice fluffed, the soup ladled into bowls that had chipped rims she never bothered to replace. They sat. He offered to serve. She let him. On the first bite, she closed her eyes and exhaled in a small, surprised sound that made him laugh. "It's good," she said, and he shook his head at the table, embarrassed and pleased. "Eat," he told her. "You need it." She did, maybe more than she had in weeks. 2 small rounds of rice, a good helping of chicken, 2 ladles of broth, each mouthful making space for the next. They talked the way people talk when they recognize that talk is a rope you throw to each other over a gap. He said the police had called. There would be paperwork in the morning. They would decide how to process the older woman who had taken Henry without permission. She said she feared promises on paper, feared a knock at the door. He told her he believed, honestly, that the woman had meant no harm, only grief, and that after this she would hesitate before she moved. Tuna folded her napkin and smoothed it again. "I know she raised me once," she said finally. "I know she is old. I know all the good things. But she took him." The last words were a small stone set gently on the table, impossible to ignore. "Then we let the police do their part," he said. "And we ask them to be firm, and you keep your doors locked, and you call me if anything even feels off." He wanted to promise more, to say what men say in movies, that he'd be there in time no matter when she needed him. But he had learned something in the last 2 days about the distance between the will to protect and the physics of roads and clocks. So he kept it to what he could keep. After a while, the talk bent away from the raw places. He told her about the yard, the trucks, the knives, Miss Chung's good instincts, and about Miss Land's grapefruit estimates. He explained how he planned to split shipments between John and Adam to keep both relationships steady. She listened, chin propped on her hand, and for a moment it felt like another life. A room with a small table, 2 bowls, work described in the easy shorthand of people on the same team. When their bowls were empty, he helped her clear. He washed. She dried. The fan drew a careful arc across the room. Henry slept on, a small tide going out and in. They stood quietly for a minute in the warm afterglow of a meal well eaten, and then the clock over the stove told him what the light already had. It was getting late. "My mother will worry," he said, apologetic. "I stayed out last night. I told her today where I was, but still." "Go," Tuna said, gentle again. "I'll lock up. I'll sleep. We'll go to the station in the morning." He stepped to the door and then back, because leaving always required one more glance. "You're safe," he said, which was different from Mass. "You'll be safe because it placed the safety in the room with her instead of out there in a future he couldn't control. Remember, call me, even if you think it's nothing." "I will." She followed him to the porch. The night smelled like warm earth and grass. Crickets started up as the last red line sank behind the hill. "Thank you," she added. And the words this time meant not just for today, but for the way he had showed up again and again, without asking her to promise anything in return. He started down the steps and paused, looking back at the shadowed square of the crib in the window. "You'll sleep better with him in there," he said. "It's easier on your nerves when you can see the rails." "I already do," she said, and surprised herself by realizing it was true. He drove away slowly, and gravel whispering under the tires. She stood until his taillights disappeared at the curve. Then she went inside, turned the lock, and leaned her forehead with gratitude against the cool wood of the door, because sometimes a door is more than a door. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that contains new habits. She tidied the table, stacked the bowls, and set a kettle in case Henry woke for warm water. She went to the crib and watched him sleep, barely moving, deeply trusting, and laid 2 fingers on his back to feel the subtle lift. "To go, mẹ sẽ cẩn thận hơn," she told the room, and the room, finally, did not argue. Later, after she bathed the boy and tucked him down, she stepped onto the porch with a bucket and threw the last handful of feed toward the coop, more a courtesy than a necessity. The hens murmured and resettled themselves. A pig snorted and rolled in its pen like a man turning over in bed to find a cool spot. She drew water for tomorrow. Guys, after watching this episode, I want to ask everyone a few things. If you were Tuna, would you forgive your former mother-in-law when she took Henry without permission? Do you think Alex really has feelings for Tuna, or is he simply trying to help? In your opinion, will the former mother-in-law come back again? If you were in Tuna's situation, what would you do to protect your child? And according to you, should Alex focus on the work at the mill or stay closer to Tuna and baby Henry? In addition, I am also very curious. Which scene in the story touched you the most? Do you want me to continue writing part 2 with more climax and surprises? Please leave your opinions in the comments below. I will read every comment and choose the best ideas to include in the next episode. Don't forget to hit subscribe and press the bell so you won't miss any episodes. Thank you all so much.
Baby Henry was taken away by Tuna's former mother-in-law, without permission, causing Tuna to panic. After 2 days of searching, Alex promptly contacted the police, and together they found the baby, bringing Henry safely back to the farm. Everyone was relieved Tuna held her child emotionally, and promised to be more careful, never leaving him alone again. Alex was always by her side, encouraging and caring for Tuna and baby Henry, bringing a crib from his house and helping to set it up, then cooking meals and taking care of the small family. Meanwhile, Alex still had to manage the work at the factory, checking the wood chipping situation, calling Hong Miss June, and colleagues to arrange production and delivery. Even after finding her child, Tuna's still worried that her former mother-in-law might return to claim custody of Henry. Alex reassured her and said he would coordinate with the police to resolve it properly. The atmosphere gradually warmed as the two ate together, talked, and Alex promised to care for and protect mother and child in the end. Work was temporarily arranged. The crib was ready and Tuna Henry, Alex were briefly reunited, hoping from now on to be safer and happier.